Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and thanks for watching. Well, two statewide grand juries have issued a report stunningly with allegations about systemic and systematic public corruption in the halls of the state legislature. To talk about that is our special guest, the Attorney General of the state of Pennsylvania, Tom Corbett. All of that and more following these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Well, I'll tell you, it was a stunning moment about 10 days ago when the Attorney General issued this report, brought the presentments of the grand jury to the press corps and subsequently to the public of the state of Pennsylvania. He eventually has prosecuted 12 people, one House member, one former House member on the Democratic side, and 10 Democratic staff members for this huge set of allegations about public corruption. Is that a good way to put it, public corruption?
That's a very good way of putting it, Terry.
He's my special guest, the Attorney General, Tom Corbett. Thank you, General Corbett.
Thanks for having me.
All right, let's get into the details of this. First of all, I mean, no one, I think, fully expected the scope and the magnitude of the allegations. I mean, one or two people, maybe 12 people, and I want to talk more about what you might do with this later. Were you shocked when you got into this with the massive nature of this?
I was certainly surprised. The investigation began, as you know, back in January, February of 2007, when it became known that bonuses had been given out, and it turned out in all four caucuses. Mm-hmm. At that time, based upon requests and just common sense, we began an investigation, to see if bonuses were paid, were they paid, who were they paid to, and why were they paid. Were they paid for doing work as a state employee, for doing your state work, or were they paid for doing campaign work or political work? As we got into it, obviously the grand jury reports are much more than just the bonuses.
Boy, I'll say.
So the bonuses just opened the door into something that I don't think anybody really thought we would run into.
Yeah,
and it was quite eye-opening.
Yeah, we call this Bonusgate, but you're absolutely right. I mean, if you read the, and by the way, this is available. You can get on the Attorney General's website. Just Google the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office. You'll get this. It's well worth reading. All of you ought to get on the site and take a look at this. Revelations are stunning. The detail and the facts in this are truly stunning. But let's go to, it seems to me now, maybe we ought to rename it Bonusgate, as you point out, just the beginning of it. If this is true, if what the grand juries say is true, we're talking about thousands and thousands of man and woman hours in which the time should have been spent on public business, but it was spent out doing campaigning and other things. In other words, private sector work on public time. That's far more serious, it seems to me, tell me if I'm wrong, than the bonuses themselves.
Well, that's going to be for the people of Pennsylvania to judge. We believe it was serious. We believe it's true. Obviously, the presentment reflects the fact that there was testimony. Right. There were thousands of emails and thousands of documents that were presented to the grand jury. The grand jury sat there and listened, and then the grand jury issued this report and this recommendation for charges against these 12 individuals. People testified in front of that grand jury, and obviously I can't go into the details because in Pennsylvania, as in the federal government, we have certain secrecy laws pertaining to grand jury proceedings. But once it issues its report, we can talk about what's in the report. Clearly, if the viewers would go to attorneygeneral.gov and pull up the report, it's for them to decide that this is only a charge. You have to remember that.
I understand that. We're not going to convict anybody here. We'll let the trial take place.
Exactly
but there's a lot of evidence. I mean, there's a lot of sort of factual detail in here. And we'll see if it holds up, under closer scrutiny when you all get to trial. But this report itself contains so many details. I mean, even if 75% of them are accurate, this is a stunning indictment of public corruption. And I think that's what, not that folks in the legislature might take time off and do campaigning. I mean, folks in government do nobody can.
Right, you have to campaign.
Yeah, but let me ask you this question. You cannot hold as a condition of employment a government job and say, well, if you want this government job, you must go do campaigning privately. You must engage in public. That's another aspect of this.
That's exactly right.
Another allegation in here. That, in some ways, along with the amount of time, seems to me is far more important than, what was it, a total of $4 million in bonuses or something like that? What was the exact amount?
3.8, 3.9, somewhere in there.
Let's round it off to $4 million. $4 million in a $28.2 billion budget? It's the principle involved here that I think ought to concern all Pennsylvanians, right?
That's exactly right. You know, politicians have to run for office if you want to get reelected, and you go out there and you spend your time. It's one thing that the politician does it, but the staff that works for them, and in this case, that's what we allege, that the staff went out there sometimes on state time. Sometimes they created fake compensatory time, we say it said in there, where they would sit around in the evening and do nothing, or maybe do campaign work when they were inside, nobody could see them. Then they would use that to try and hide the fact when they went out publicly. When staffers go off the payroll, they should go off the payroll completely. That's another aspect in there that we allege that not only did they, in some cases, go off the payroll, but they were continue to be paid their health benefits. Well, I think anybody would like to have their health benefits paid while they do something else other than their job. So we looked at the grand jury looked at this entire spectrum, and as I continue to say, this is an ongoing investigation.
All right, we're talking with the Attorney General of the state of Pennsylvania. We're going to get into details. Follow the money. What does that mean? As always, you go where the money is. You'll find out what it reveals. Back with the Attorney General of the state of Pennsylvania following these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Pennsylvania Medical Society. Doctors and patients, preserve the relationship. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back to the program with Tom Corbett. He's the Attorney General of the state of Pennsylvania. We're talking about what is commonly referred to as Bonusgate, which is a lot more than bonuses, as everybody now knows. All right. Follow the money. It's an old deal. I think this expression first came from Watergate. And when they were doing all those Watergate investigations, where did this money come from to pay these bonuses out of the regular legislative accounts? I mean, what's the situation with when you got into the details of this? Where did the money come from?
Well, obviously, if we're just going to talk about the Democrats right now,
let's talk about the Democrats.
There was 1.8 plus that were alleged to be paid in bonuses. We've determined that about 1.2 was paid for what we call secret bonuses. You know, the other bonuses were probably for doing legitimate office work, state work. 1.2 was not. That money all came out of the general fund appropriated to the General Assembly. Each caucus gets a certain appropriation. That's as far as I can tell you what we know.
So they were taking the money, as far as you know, to pay the bonuses out of the general caucus money that the General Assembly appropriates for itself annually. And then they hold on to that money. It doesn't end like the rest of state.
The most important thing to take from this is this was taxpayer dollars.
Well,
that's the most important thing.
All right, let's talk a little bit about, you know, the press has covered in great detail a lot of the specifics of the charges. You know, we now know about, you know, the chief of staff having a sexual relationship with a woman in Pittsburgh. We now know about how this political operation within the House Democratic Caucus influenced a whole bunch of campaigns, not just for the state legislature, but in races for the U.S. Senate, even for the presidency in this state.
Even for the presidency.
I want to ask you a more specific question. Do you think that if you had, and the Auditor General of this state had more authority over auditing, and then you in your role as Attorney General, more responsibility over the legislature's activities, this would have been prevented? Or do you think there's probably nothing that could have been done by your office or the...
Well, that's kind of a three-pronged question.
Okay.
Let me address it from our perspective. I think we did exactly what the Attorney General was created for in the first place. As you know, I'm only the fourth elected Attorney General.
Right.
And we created an Attorney General as an elected position in 1979, 1980 as a result of prior corruption.
Right.
And to have an independent oversight. And obviously what we're doing here today, and in many other cases that we do, we are performing our function. In regard to the Auditor General, the ability to take a look at those monies in the General Assembly, as I understand it, is not there because there's an issue of separation of powers between the legislative and the executive. And so that becomes an issue. The third question you ask is, would we have found it? I don't know at this point in time, but I certainly know that if those monies were subject to disclosure, it would certainly make it much easier for people. Or the
practices. How about the practices of having these people out for, the allegation is for weeks and weeks and weeks campaigning while they're on the public payroll. I mean, wouldn't good internal audit procedures pick that up?
You would think so.
Yeah, so maybe that begs the question to the legislature.
Remember that separation of powers.
Yeah, I understand, but also independent. You're an independent entity. The Auditor General is, and maybe there needs to be the legislature needs to strengthen what your office does. But without going. All right, let's go to another aspect of this. Look, I'll give you a chance to answer this question because it's been asked. You know where I'm heading with this. All D's, all Democrats. People have said, well, not so much since the report has come out, however, because the evidence is the evidence in here, without convicting anybody, is about as comprehensive as I think I've seen in a grand jury presentment. So without getting into whether anyone's innocent or guilty specifically, all right, they say you prosecuted Democrats. Where does this go? Are the Republicans on the horizon? Are you looking into all three caucuses?
Let's go back to the beginning.
It's a big question.
Let's go back to the beginning. When it became known that bonuses were given, and nobody knew that bonuses were given from what I recall. You might recall differently.
No, I don't.
And I said this in my opening statement, we met with representatives and counsel of all four caucuses. Mm-hmm. And we continue to have those kind of meetings and interviews. At one point in time, though, it became known to us that documents were, we believe, being destroyed. This was August of last year in the Democrat Legislative Research Office. We looked at the amount of money involved, and you mentioned earlier, follow the money. Well, $1.8 million, and the next highest level was, I think, $300,000, a couple hundred thousand.
Yep.
And I have limited resources. Well, you focus your resources where the biggest number is. You combine that with the fact that we believe documents are being destroyed. We execute a search warrant that is given to us by a judge. We go in. We took 20 boxes of documents out. That's reviewed by the judge.
Right.
Those documents are again reflected in the grand jury report as containing opposition research.
Right.
Obviously, that's where you're going to focus the resources that you have. We are continuing to investigate the other three caucuses.
So, the final question. Would you expect that there'll be additional charges at some point?
Do I expect additional charges? Yes.
Okay. That's all right. When you come back, we'll have you back and we can talk more about it. I want to thank you. I know you're a busy guy. We'll be back. John Hanger is one of the state's leading environmentalists, is going to join us. We're going to talk about all these changes in energy and the environment. Lots to talk about there. Back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Now joining me, as often is the case, is John Hanger. He's the president of PennFUTURE, the state's leading environmental organization. We'll get into trouble, John, every time I do that, but that's okay. Truth is a perfect defense, right?
Absolutely.
Look, John, you're one of our go-to guys. Whenever we want to talk about the environment and energy, you were a member of the Public Utilities Commission. I want to talk a little bit about the search for alternative energy sources and this big debate that goes on about how it should be done. As you know, ethanol is huge as a potential source of energy, relieving us from foreign competition on oil. It can be made from a whole variety of sources. corn is the most often mentioned, but that's causing food prices to go up. Give us a rundown on that, if you would.
I think the big point to remember is that gasoline that we use right now is a pretty lousy source of energy now. It's no longer cheap. And that's why we've been using it up to now. Now it's very expensive.
Right.
And it actually, environmentally, is very destructive, gasoline. It takes more energy to make a gallon of gasoline than you get out from burning it, for example, as what's called a negative energy balance. So we do need to move to alternatives. Ethanol can be made from a lot of different kinds of plant material. Right now, most of it's made from corn, and that's a food crop. But in the future, probably in as little as 5 years, most of ethanol could be made from other kinds of plant material that are not food, are not crops.
Cellulose-based? Is that the word that, go ahead.
Yeah, the word is cellulosic or cellulose, right. And it means making ethanol to run cars on from plant material that is not used to make food.
Now, but the point about it is that much of cellulosity, if that's the right word, you're the expert on this, cellulose, can be used, in lands that typically wouldn't be employed to raise sort of the food crops and crops to feed animals. So it might be, we might get a couple of advantages out of that we wouldn't get out of just using corn-based ethanol, right or wrong?
Absolutely right. One example of that is something called switchgrass, which is, you can't eat it, at least humans can't eat it, but it actually can be used to make ethanol. Right. And it grows, fortunately, very well on abandoned mine lands, which has a poor quality soil, and you're not going to use abandoned mine lands often for any other purpose, really. So switchgrass could be planted on abandoned mine lands. It could, in fact, produce a lot of ethanol over time. So we're about 5 years away from a real revolution in biofuels.
All right, I'm going to talk, look, you remember the PUC. We've done a lot of programs on rate caps. There's a real controversy about whether they should expire. Legislature, as we sit here, is considering extending the caps or mitigating them in some way. I know that you've said on this show before that you think the caps have to come off. We need the market to work a little bit to see. Is there anything in the last couple of months since we talked about this that have caused you to change your mind about it?
No. To put the simple answer out there. First, rate caps have ended in 6 service territories in Pennsylvania. They've ended in Pittsburgh. The Duquesne Light Service Territory that provides electricity to the whole Pittsburgh region had rate caps end in 2002. I very rarely hear that mentioned. And so we've already ended rate caps in Pennsylvania in big parts of the state. Now, it's true that the remaining parts of the state, and there are substantial areas like the Philadelphia area, the Harrisburg area, and others, will have their rate caps end around 2010, about 18 to 30 months from now. The electricity rates have been capped for 14 years, Terry. You can't keep capping a price of a product without distorting all kinds of things. The caps need to end. But we also need to do smart things now to prepare for them ending elsewhere in the state.
And one of them would be the way the utility companies are trying to handle the billing so that it's not a 30 or 35% hike. Gradually phase in the rate cap or the price increases that certainly consumers will see.
Absolutely. Phasing in over a 2-3 year period, whatever the rate increase should be done. But the single most important thing, Terry, is actually giving consumers ways of reducing their usage and conserving their electricity.
You mentioned something. We're going to go to a break. I want to talk about some things that people can do, and one of them is smart meters, and there is some misunderstanding about that. We'll let John Hanger clear that up following these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by PennFUTURE, where we believe that every environmental victory grows the economy, and by the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, bringing educational innovation and freedom to the children of Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program with John Hanger, one of our go-to guys when we talk about energy and the environment. John, let's talk a little bit about conservation. We've been hearing a lot about smart meters and what they do and why they're important. Some people have raised some questions about whether they're as effective or not. How do you respond to that?
Well, the first thing to note is that every customer in the PPL service territory, 1.3 million, and that's the service territory in the Harrisburg area, has a smart meter. Yeah. The PPL put them in those properties from 2002 to 2004, and they've saved customers a lot of money. They're not being fully used to their full capacity.
Right.
And House Bill 2200, which is the energy conservation bill, would require that they be fully used and that the other utilities in the state install smart meters over a 10-year period. Smart meters are vital to giving consumers more choices and more tools to cut their energy bills, and especially to cut their peak energy consumption, which is the single thing that drives up our electric bills most. It's the peak energy consumption. On a day like that we have in the summer when it's 90 degrees and more, it gets very expensive. So House Bill 2200 is a vital piece of business. It wasn't done in the budget deal. Right. Pileggi and others are saying he'll take it up in September. And that's
Senator Pileggi, the president pro tem of the
majority
leader of the Senate. I'm sorry, I'll get that right. Go ahead.
Yeah, he has said he will take it up in September, and that's important because the bill has passed the House overwhelmingly, and it's sitting in the Senate and it's stalled.
All right, before you go, I want you to come back next month, and I want to have a more extensive discussion about all sorts of clean energy funding, and maybe we can talk a little more about how Pennsylvania in particular we're sitting on a ton of energy here. As you know, we were an old coal and steel state. We're now transitioning out of that. You're the great person to chat about how you think Pennsylvania can play a big role in alternative energy, but we also have some clean energy funding in place. Talk about that before you go.
The governor and the legislature did get one important piece of business done in end of June, beginning of July, and that was the $650 million energy fund. It includes money for alternative energy.
Right.
And I think the most important single piece is $180 million for solar. Terry, the 21st century is going to be the solar century. The 20th century was the petroleum century.
Right.
We're going into the solar century.
That's exactly what you can come back and talk about in August. We'll have you back. We'll get into that in detail. Thanks for watching Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.